or any type of other mineral, you would say, let's say, sodium chloride, there's 300 parts per million sodium chloride. So, for example, when you have hard or soft water, usually in a house, they would say 200.
Whoa. What the hell is hard and soft water?
How much mineral concentration is in your water.
Okay.
So, you asked how salty is too salty. We would measure that by the hardness of the water. We measure that in EC or ppm. And according to health experts, hard water is around over 200 ppm. So if you have water over 200 ppm,
We need mics.
they usually suggest you go through some sort of water filtration to reduce the mineral content. Whether or not it's salt specifically, you'd have to analyze the minerals, but that's the baseline that we use, is regular, clean, drinkable water will be under 200 ppm to be considered soft, usable water.
Interesting. So now I know. Now we know, right? Now a lot of people like, what is your actual title? You know, I think I consider you an expert on, you know, plants, the knowledge of biology and understanding, you know, what goes into plants, what needs to be put into plants. You know, would you say cannabis is like actually, you know, your focus or your specific area, or does that like kind of translate over to all vegetation?
I would say that I am a business consultant who specializes in agronomy, business planning in the areas of cannabis and hemp, as well as understanding possible interactions between the way business affects legally regulated markets like cannabis and how that intersects with agronomy.
What is agronomy?
Agronomy is the study of agriculture and how it relates to the economics of agriculture. So basically how we study how to grow.
One of the oldest industries.
I would say the original industry is agronomy.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons why U.S., I would say, the U.S. economy is become a little unstable is because we don't invest in what is really one of our biggest assets, which is advanced, high-quality agronomy. But yeah, I would say agronomy and how it relates to the business world, specializing in cannabis and hemp.
Why is the U.S. not investing in our agronomy? What's going on with that? I
One-
know the trade war is like a big thing, and that's been a massive thing. You know, the trade war between the U.S. and China, and how we've been spending our money, or, you know, the tariffs we're putting on different imports and exports, and a lot of that stuff is, you know, raw materials or even agricultural products. You know, soybeans being a massive, corn being another massive thing that, you know, we probably produce that we export out there. So what is it that we're not doing?
So it's interesting because we have some of the biggest investments in agriculture, but in my opinion, a misprioritization of how to invest. For example, instead of subsidies, if we were investing in diversification of crops, education and application of the highly developed and very well researched organic alternatives, we would be able to take a lot of what I consider to be our downsides and change that investment. Instead of creating safety nets for subsidized crops grown synthetically, if we were able to create investment and motivation for farmers to diversify crops, to implement organic regenerative techniques, we'd be able to use the same money we're already using to invest in the agriculture space, but use it to invest in the processes and infrastructure that will allow us to evolve our agronomy in general and our agricultural sector so that it can be a leader again instead of just another bulk producer. And I think that's it's that thing that I hate the most, which is unequal comparisons. If we're different, you need to embrace the difference. And we have higher cost labor, which forces us into specialized versions of economies. We should be embracing that. And I think in agriculture, us not doing that is the main reason why we have the most socialist president in the history of mankind. Donald Trump has socialized more agricultural products than any president before him. So it's very interesting to see even a Republican president has to use socialist economic policy to save the most advanced sector of agronomy that we've ever developed. And, I find it to be simply because instead of investing in adaptation and evolution, we invest in an economic safety net. And more times than not, that happens from both sides of the political spectrum.
I mean, how did it get that way? I mean, because actually, I think this is a systemic problem that goes across all of, most of, big business and big government at the same time is like the worst problem ever. And like, as we've seen, like industries have been able to collapse all of the other smaller industries that existed. We see that with farming. I know we're experiencing that one right now with meat and all these meat shortages we're having. And it's like, not only would the things not be, these things wouldn't be cesspools for coronavirus, but they would not be like, first of all, meat wouldn't cost that cheap, and meat shouldn't cost that cheap. And actually, I think we talked about this before, we've sold out the American people in our country to buy cheaper shit and cheaper quality product, from the food we eat to
the police we hire,
to the police we hire, to the plastic, the plastic shitty products that we're told to buy on Amazon that are supposed to really fulfill us in life. And it's like, is that all it is? That's supposed to be worth saving someone else a buck, or saving them millions to save us a few dollars? Like, that's like the payoff. Like, and that's what we're told is life. That's what we're supposed to be okay with.
So I think it just kind of highlights the flaw in pure capitalism.
Shit, we've already taken it away from agronomy and into...
Well, I think, in my opinion, pure capitalism and agronomy is a science. And in my opinion, the two things that make America strong are innovation in science, innovation in art. And pretty much, you have to hit record?
I'm going to make sure it records on the camera too. Keep going.
All right. So pretty much when we innovate in our art, when we innovate in our science, we end up able to differentiate. And the difference becomes is the most profitable model isn't always innovation. More times than not, it's creating efficiency. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, if you do that while creating security by basically using the massive amount of wealth that you and your business partners are able to accumulate, you create this network of this company pays for my other company, and just by moving inventory throughout your network of businesses, you're able to create lending options, accessibility to funds, accessibility to continue to grow and increase your footprint in markets without ever having to innovate, just because you have more money. I think this unfair competitive advantage is one of the big reasons why you see big companies not only dominate product areas but stagnate over time, and this combination really negatively affects necessary and what I would call required services like food, like education itself, like healthcare, like policing. That instead, if you make the government investment to innovate and progress these areas, you can allow the private sector to have to do better than that. And I'm not saying you do it in every sector, but in sectors that most of us would consider human needs, health, education, and things like accessibility to food, we would be able to not only keep a higher quality of living, a higher standard, you're also incentivizing innovation at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting to get your take on it, because you work on this in cannabis, and cannabis is one of those new markets that's become legal. And so, we see this in is it almost like 38 or 40 states have like medicinal laws now. And then, about 8 or 10, I'd say, have completely legalized, or we're not that far yet?
No, to be honest, I think we're over 20 states in full rec, maybe even more.
Really?
So it's becoming inevitable.
Good job, everybody. That's massive.
Yeah, I would say legalization is a for sure thing at this point. I think the Farm Bill legalizing hemp solidifies that. The species of cannabis is legal. Now they're differentiating on oppressing a certain species, the THC species. And in my opinion...
What do you mean oppressing? Who's oppressing?
I think the government unknowingly has deselected legalization of THC federally because of its psychoactive properties, without knowing that it's actually the more medicinal active ingredient and allows CBD to do what it's supposed to do even more efficiently and effectively. So really they're discriminating based on psychoactivity, which is, they're right in their job.
Which is always the case. I mean, they're always going to discriminate.
It's an expected oppression.
And rightfully so. I mean, I taught, another psychonaut and a guy who, is really into the, the personal rights of psychoactive substances, and I definitely consider cannabis to be a psychoactive substance.
100%.
Because I don't think people realize, that it gives you that certain level of self-reflection that you can't, not you can't, but that it, through meditation and mindfulness, it's really hard. These drugs or these plants, or substances, they'll let you get to those states of, awareness quicker, faster, and harder, like punch in the mouth harder sometimes, that you experience those things. So that's, I think, one of the great and beautiful things about it. And also, I think, from the other cannabis doctors I've had on the show, like you mentioned right there, you're limiting the THC psychoactive part of the plant, and people are using CBD, but they're still not getting the full benefits of CBD, because CBD is going to work better when you have the full spectrum, when you're getting THC, terpenes, and the CBD itself in there. When you're getting the whole plant right there, you're going to receive even higher benefits of whatever.
You've come a long way since our first interview,
I don't
Brandon.
think you've listened to the guy, Dr. What's his name? He's a Florida doctor, a cannabis doctor. He's been doing cannabis medicine, writing prescriptions for people.
Yeah. I must have missed this one.
Mike McKenzie.
Okay.
Character.
Yeah.
Character, but he's fantastic, and he really works on the legality of just cannabis, across the country.
Yeah.
Advocating for it and whatnot. Definitely got to look into. And he's, besides you, one that really advocated and nailed that point home for me. Like, even though we got these CBD on the table, it's still, there's certain small dosages of THC, because it's from Colorado, that they can provide or even sell across state lines.
Yeah, I believe it's less than 0.3% THC is the hemp legality.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. People ask, do you smoke? And I would say, I don't smoke enough. I probably need to smoke more cannabis. And
yeah, I definitely smoke too much. That's for sure.
And to have, those, better experiences at the end of the day. But back to, we're talking about regulation and THC and cannabis itself really coming and emerging into the market. How is the accessibility coming in? I think because last time we spoke, New York State was really pushing for, because they were really coming into the legality or bringing cannabis into the recreational space, we'll say. And, what we're experiencing now is that because this has been preventative by the government for hundreds of 100 years almost, that regular people or low-income people have no availability to get into this market. It's really hard.
From a business side, for sure.
From a business standpoint. Yeah. It's hard to break in.
Yeah, I was going to say, accessibility is probably, from a consumer side, the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
But, yeah, well
Hassan Minhaj did that great piece you guys put me on to.
Yeah.
Really identifying, and pointing out, like, John Boehner, of all people.
It's a perfect example
owns a massive stocks and equity in different cannabis companies.
Yeah.
And
he put more people in jail for cannabis-related crimes than probably any other congressman in the history.
He did, for sure?
He was the leader of the Republican Party during years in which they continued to enforce federal crimes, as well as the DEA. It was still when the DEA was enforcing it upon states. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, due to the population size alone, he was, during this time, we were arresting the most people for cannabis per year. And he was the leader of the Republican Party. So if he's not individually and factually the most responsible, I would say he's got to make the top 10 for most influential as far as putting people in jail for cannabis. And when asked about this, he said this was a different time. So he literally didn't deny this. He just said that, things change, and I'm different now. So it's interesting to see when the individuals who were in it from a factual standpoint and those in it from opportunistic standpoint. And from my understanding, New York delayed their legalization because there
was no accessibility.
There wasn't enough accessibility, and they thought the legislation they had wouldn't be enough. I'm a firm believer that that's not the case. I agree with what they said. I think that in most states, business accessibility to licensing is 0. I think my home state, Florida, is the perfect example of this. One of the most fixed licensing
Shout
states.
out Florida.
I mean, it's kind of next level.
Proud Floridians. The proud Floridians.
The level of corruption is pretty high.
Oh, that's what we're known for. I love Billy Corbin, the tweets he puts out.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, only Florida, another representative in Miami-Dade County, just charged with extorting or laundering money from people or businesses, and it's just, people don't realize, I think Rogan puts it all the time, is that all the criminals from the Northeast or, anywhere else in the country, they made their way down from the 50s and 60s, and we still, Florida, for me at least, it's like the wild, wild west. The things you can get away with in the city of Miami in terms of like how long you can go out and party, the things you can get, the things you can do, and really pushing and teetering the line of legality, Florida is your place. People, fuck Vegas. If you really want to push it, head to Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, and you'll still be able to get local cuisine for less than $10 a plate.
That's right. Remember, it's live on Sundays, king of diamond Mondays. Don't forget it. Still a Miami slogan.
I don't know if anybody's still doing that trick. But
Drake is.
I think even he's given that one up. But yeah, I would say that's really the biggest issue right now in cannabis is business representation throughout. I would just say it needs to reflect the population of areas. And California as the best example, it does not reflect the population whatsoever. And I would say even more so, it's going to be harder and harder with the amount of time they've given big money as a head start to ever equalize it. It's almost to the point where we're getting the corporate side of cannabis to mature to where they understand the real industry is more likely than to even the playing field and try again.
Well,
I think this train has left the station, to be honest.
Well, I mean, California, I know we talked about this last time because Prop 64 had passed, and we also tried to do a bunch of black market shoots. We have the content. We still got to put that together.
Yeah.
Some really cool, interesting stuff with some what they would be called illegal growers. But
No, technically, they're medical growers.
Medical growers.
Who possibly might be, we don't know for sure, over their plant count.
Okay.
So as far as we're concerned, they're medical patients who are growing their legal amount of plants.
Well, we don't know them, or we might know them, but I didn't see any faces. There were no faces exposed.
No faces on the program, so I didn't see any faces either.
No faces.
But I would say that, in my opinion, the two biggest issues that relate to the individual is I think that people should push for their right to cultivate a decent amount of plants at home. I think that should be everybody's right as a human being.
I'm doing that now.
And I think more states should allow, like Florida, for example, I don't believe allows any individual to grow plants, but I think everybody should be able to grow a personal amount of plants. My definition of a personal amount of plants is the traditional California rule, which was 99. They've brought that down to 6.
That's a lot.
I would say, but now that you've played with plants, having a bunch of copies and things of the things you like best is really where this rule, in my opinion, is short-sighted. If you had 6 things you liked, you could never grow any more cannabis ever. And technically, as soon as you cut a clone to keep a copy of the things you like, you're over plant count. So you could keep 3 things and have a backup of 3 things and flower 3 plants at a time. I mean, it becomes something to where is there anything else they manage how much of something you can have that's recreationally legal? You can buy 1 million beers. You can, I mean, it's just one of these things that the planting system, there's never been anything that is this legal and this preventative of doing for an individual.
Well, I also think that's a policy thing. Like in some backroom deal between 2 politicians, we say, okay, what number are you okay with that we can grow or can't grow?
Not even backroom. Most of it's done in a local local town council meeting.
Of course. But I'm saying there is no probably actual number or factual basis in choosing that number. It was like, what number are you okay with?
10 sounds like a lot.
For your conservative constituent.
10. Yeah.
99, it's not triple digits. We'll take it.
So that's where it started. And then they said, whoa, 99, these guys can make money off 99. It must got to be less than that. So 10 sounds like a lot. How about less than 10? I mean, realistically, it's something that is a not fact-based number. It's something they kind of pulled out of thin air. But
what is going on in California? Because I know we're talking about Prop 64 right now and everything that happened, and we kind of went out and seen, what these non-medical growers are pushing or working on, and teetering on the number where they kind of are hitting the range, where they're not hitting the range. And I know you had mentioned last time that a lot of the money in our tax dollars for this prop are going towards enforcement.
So it's interesting. Since that time, I would say what was happening was enforcement was on the rise. The legal market was holding a decent price point. The underground market was tanking. As more and more people were running into danger, they were
pull your mic.
The growers were kind of looking to move their material fast. What's happened since then, it's very interesting, is the more they enforce, the higher the price of black market goes, and the more incentivized getting back involved is. So instead of kind of letting everybody lowball themselves into obliteration, by thinning out the market, cannabis is up 100% on the black market right now.
Mm-hmm.
So a year ago, what was going for $2,000 is going for $4,000.
Yeah, that meme, that GIF with John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis in that movie.
Yeah.
Just in an aerobics class, just strutting their...
Shout out to my buddy who made that, Always Running Dank. I'm surprised you saw that.
What do you mean? That was the funniest thing. I've been sharing that all over the internet. Shout out to that guy. What's his name?
Oh, at Always Running Dank.
Always Running Dank. What a legend. What a good guy.
Yeah.
And...
But a perfect example
it's so prohibition. Like in terms of like the same things are happening that happened during prohibition, and even though we're pushing this legality, enforcing, to protect bigger business on enforcement to protect their dollars, it's only hurting the smaller people, and it's actually jacking up, like always, the black market prices.
So it's very interesting to me to see how now enforcement for a very short-term period kind of really hurt the black market, but what I'm seeing is the reaction to that, the long-term effects are going to be the more they do that, the higher price points the people who stay in are going to get. So what we're seeing in cannabis is a flourishing of the underground markets. Legal entities that were really disrupted by coronavirus are really hurting. There's lots of legal entities going under. I would say that the couple of brands that have direct-to-consumer businesses were able to do okay. Some that were really focused direct-to-consumer were able to accelerate sales throughout the period. But realistically, I see another big shift in the industry as all businesses in America deal with the fallout of coronavirus. But realistically, it's something that the black market's going to see a little bit of a run in 2020. Because the legal market isn't prepared to make up for the difference in lack of production compared to last year.
Yeah, I mean, we saw we're learning a lot of the slip-ups, seeing state and even federal governments dealing with this. I think Canada had a massive problem once they went legal in terms of what they were going to tax certain growers. And again, it was hindering the accessibility in the marketplace where, where is the legal grower going to make his money if a certain percentage is going towards enforcement and the tax dollars to enforce that thing. Oregon just, said, hey, anybody can grow.
See, there's the opposite problem, though.
Yeah.
Oregon ruined their market by making the bar too low. So it's something that when you look at markets like New York, markets like Florida, markets like California, the three biggest weed markets in the country.
Florida, really?
Oh, yeah. Floridians buy and sell more weed than you could ever measure, one, because it's not on the books yet, but two, because a lot of it goes out into the Caribbean. So the whole Caribbean is fed from America. Oh, yes. A lot of people don't realize this, but you go on vacation on a cruise, and you go find the guy selling weed, he's selling Cali weed.
I remember in Aruba they would always try and sell it.
They got Cali weed in Aruba. When me and your sister went, I found Cali weed. It is Cali indoor weed.
I love how people try and market it though because it's a Dutch island, a former Dutch colony.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's Amsterdam hydroponic.
Nah, they're done with that. When I was there, what was it, a year ago?
Oh, we've completely added Amsterdam.
Oh, it's no
and the
longer
Netherlands.
relevant in my opinion.
Yeah.
And even like I said, throughout the island, so Florida's kind of the hub for that. And
Really?
yeah.
Tell me more about this. How long has that been going?
That's all I'm gonna say on that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It just is. You're gonna have to take my word for it.
It just is. This guy's holding out on us.
It just is. You just got to understand that it gets out to the islands by way of California through Florida.
Okay. So
it just happens. What I would say
so
is
it's like cocaine with Colombia.
it's just
And
one of those things
Peru,
that
Bolivia.
geographically there's always a jump off point. So I know a bunch of people in New York who send things to Europe. You can even do that out of Florida and California, but going through high traffic points is the best way to do it. And to do it where you also have a local travel route is even more beneficial. So if you're geographically located near something, you're going to do really well. That's like a lot of the cheap weed in California comes from Mexico. A lot of people don't realize that.
Really?
That people will actually get it across the border just because you make a lot more money with your cheap weed across the border than you would in Mexico. So most of the cheap weed in California is Mexican. Most of the cheap weed everywhere else is cheap California, and everybody's expensive weed is expensive California. So even in England, people buy California weed in England.
Oh, I bet.
And it's like Cali packs are like a thing. So it's something that which is one reason why I think the California market will continue to do well, and eventually when it goes federal, will be one of the few places actually getting international kind of distribution.
Oh, we're going to be crushing it. I mean, again, they think it's a blue state, it's California. Like, it's the 5th largest market in the world. Like, the amount of traffic, not even cannabis, that comes through this state and the enterprises and the business they have. Like, oh, businesses are leaving. I'm like, last thing I checked, Silicon Valley is still in California.
Last time I checked, still everybody lives here. One, so it's its own country.
55 million, right?
Its own country. 2, it's its own country that has a massively higher quality of living. But what that really means is dollars to spend. So it has an average consumer who spends more, who is looking for consumable products more. So you can drive, it goes back to this whole, how do you drive innovation? You can drive innovation in this market because there's so much white space to still take over in every industry. It's why California births all your favorite brands. It births all your favorite technology. It births things based in art and innovation, which is really, I personally think that some of our other sectors could kind of take a cue from and become their own center of innovation.
Like what?
I'll give you a great example of somebody doing this. Look at what Disney did in Central Florida for theme parks when they innovated. This is American innovation at its great. They went around, they bought all this acreage of nonsense land, and they created a productive billion-dollar company off of theme parks. Before then, it was circuses. It was a bunch of wooden roller coasters and Ferris wheels, and the vision, the art.
St. David's Church Fair.
These types of things, these carnivals. This was what was in its place before
Shout
Disney.
out to St. David's Church.
So Disney goes out and they have the vision, forward-thinking, artistic minds to incorporate innovation and art into an industry that's been around the world for thousands of years. This games for the average human being. This is kind of what this is. Gladiatorial times they had these things. Right? This is just the latest iteration of this. But by doing that, you take something that is a good business and turn it into one of the biggest entertainment enterprises ever to be developed. And that park was the center of that. I mean, they have all this content around it, but the American infrastructure that is Disney World, that is as big as a city, and when you compare it to Disneyland in LA, it seems like a kid's park. And as kids park, I mean kiddie size, compared to Disney World, where the castle is truly the size of a castle.
You can go inside and eat in it.
You can stay in there for $20,000 a night.
Really?
They only do it very rarely. You can get married in the castle there. Oh yeah, they got this place. It's another level, but the amount of innovation, investment, and
I actually know a chick who's getting married there
Yeah.
Post-corona, yeah.
So from my understanding, in certain occasions, they'll also let you rent it for a night. Like you can stay there. I think if you get your wedding there, that's part of those occasions.
That's one of those you better not get divorced right there. You're spending money on a wedding at Disney. I'd be yelling at this chick, yo, you want this? We ain't going back. I don't even know if I could execute on that. I don't have the stomach or the spending. I have a lot of gusto to go green on things, but ooh. A Disney wedding? Whoa!
Disney wedding in the real castle, but pretty much that type of...
Like, what value are you bringing to me to get this Disney wedding? Well, it's a value exchange.
Hopefully that you guys are the most value you've ever found in another human being. That's the idea, right? So
there better be a lot of value in that.
I think you'll find
even
someone.
If she'd paid, I don't think I could go to this. We can't spend the money on this. Even if you're cash,
but
I couldn't go.
To create something that is so next level.
Of course, back to the topic of
right?
Disney ingenuity.
So this ingenuity, this forward thinking, I think you've seen it in streetwear is a great example. And what you see when the Japanese kind of stole streetwear from America.
Well, I think they steal everything in Japan. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think they are so good at taking different... what do you want to say, markets or industries, or even like what they do so well is
adapt and make their own though.
Artisan designs of shit. Like coffee or just like metalware.
Even beef. They do it to everything. And this type of innovation.
I love that culture, man.
And they bet on themselves.
They
bet on their skill set.
First place we got to go.
Oh, 100%.
You ready for a $200 round trip ticket to Tokyo?
Oh, let me know. Brianna, we're going to Tokyo. Where's the camera? We're going to Tokyo.
They're probably running that cheap right now, dude.
Wait a little longer.
I mean, I've got a $400 round trip ticket to Tokyo before, but right now you can probably get that.
I don't see 200, but maybe 400. And I'll tell you what.
Let me do the shopping on that Disney wedding style. I got you.
Yeah, if you buy it, I'll go.
I'm not buying it. I'm gonna point you in the direction of the deal.
But yeah, I would say that if we can take a little bit of the things that made America different, which were innovating and artistic addition to innovation in an American style, because I think that Japanese style is its own, and that's why when the entire world saw what the Japanese did with streetwear, everybody did their own version, and personally I connect with a lot of the American versions the most. And you're starting to see, I'll give you a perfect example. There's another example. There's this gentleman who was homeless in Las Vegas and he ended up creating a resale store. So he would buy your Supreme and resale it. He had his little resale store, got so big, he ended up moving into a store right off the place where he used to panhandle. Recently, he just signed a multi-million-dollar contract with American Apparel in New York, and they're starting their own resale business. So American Apparel, who does not have accounts with any high-end designer and could never get them, is now reselling.
That is Gary Vee written all over right there.
And so their foresight and innovation to understand that the way that things are sold in a designer market are different, and his innovation of making a high-end experience for limited edition designer things created this new business opportunity to where American Apparel is now in this space of business they never could have been before, and they're doing it for the least amount of risk and overhead and cost by partnering with somebody who used this streetwear art style of designer clothes and matched it with pawn shop style reselling. We'll buy and sell. So you can go there, you can sell your clothes there, and then they'll sell you some stuff too. So it's kind of wild. You see a great example of that is Round 2 out here in L.A. Sean Witherspoon did the same thing.
Is that the kid whose business got destroyed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Verge made a fool of himself trying to defend it. But outside of that, Virgil Abloh, this is what started the whole thing. But
the $50 donation thing.
So it started with...
Who is this guy? Give us a backstory first.
Virgil Abloh?
I've only vaguely heard who he is.
Okay, so a huge innovator, an artist who was with Stussy. He started doing DJing. You know what's hilarious is I think what you and your friends are doing with DJ most resembles what him and his friends were doing with DJing. Mm-hmm. Him and a couple other guys.
My set's right after this, so if you're watching this,
stay tuned.
Right into a DJ set, 2-3 hours.
But basically, what he was doing is he was designing with Kanye, him and a couple other artists that helped with the Yeezy launch. So obviously, very talented people beforehand. Started mixing into these Stussy parties where he would DJ. Kind of developed into the hottest brand, and he created Off-White with the quotations. Everything you see with the quotations is his. So when you see like something that has two quotations and like an arrow or something, that's his style. With that style, Louis Vuitton made him the director of fashion and design. So he became the first, somebody correct me if I'm mistaken, but he became the first Black American leader of a fashion house, a classic Italian fashion house. And recently, during this transition, a lot of African American streetwear, especially artists, are getting embraced and finally given the recognition that individuals like Dapper Dan, who is the guy who made all the Gucci jackets for Jay-Z and all these guys back in the day, he got sued by Fendi. And nobody would sell him cloth back in the day. So all those Gucci jackets were made from like bags and stuff he would disassemble because nobody would sell him cloth. So it's kind of interesting to see how as artists are blended with big companies to create innovation, like Yeezy Project, and then he took it a step further with Off-White, and then took it a step further with what he's doing with Louis Vuitton. This artist combination with, in Yeezy's case, it was technology and lifestyle. In the Louis Vuitton case, it's a unique perspective combined with high fashion. But this combination of innovation and artistry takes something like an Off-White bag, and I don't know if you've seen some of the Nikes he's done, but it takes a $100 Nike and it resells for $1,000 now. $200 Jordan, and they're reselling for $1,000 now. But it creates this added value, and it goes right back to the only real added value is sometimes it's an innovation in function and form, but more times than not, it's an innovation in feeling. How does this make you feel in addition to what does it do for you? So when you get that Off-White t-shirt and you get his little 4 arrows and you watch it sell out, and then you go on StockX in 2 weeks and that $80 t-shirt selling for $400, this added value of exclusivity, of maybe it has a really cool design as well. So you get this pleasurable artistic feeling. Getting that feel-good factor back into American economies is the difference. Why do people love their iPhone? Art. This is a better looking phone than all the other things for a long time.
Yeah.
Its software is better looking. The innovation was originally, it's been surviving off of software and artistic kind of presentation for, I would say, a decade, and it's still the leader in phones. This is, in my opinion, American innovation and artistry. All the successful American companies embrace this. The big giants do it while becoming more efficient as well. And that becomes the whole balance. Why I like using Apple as an example of somebody who in the beginning was what I consider an ideal player in an industry and has transitioned more into a classic player in the industry, using leverage deals and their size to own the market space. And that's why you've seen innovation lack in their product line for a long time. But because they're so big, they're going to own the space for the foreseeable future until somebody can break through either with technology
or with DMT.
Well,
just a good breakthrough.
Unless you can connect with the breakthrough people are making, so I think that. So what do you kind of touch on is
no. I'm just taking a drug terminology.
But what I would say is that breakthrough that people talk about in drug terminology, where you talk to any drug, whether it even be weed, I had this breakthrough, I had this moment of reflection I wouldn't have had otherwise. It's usually a shift in perspective or approach, and that can be chemically, that it gives you the opportunity to see something you wouldn't have saw before. And the perfect example of this is if I gave you a cylinder and I put it in front of you, right? And all you saw was the side view, and you drew it, it's a rectangle. And then all I gave you was the top view, and I gave you a picture. You say, that thing's a circle. And then I give you both pictures. It's neither a rectangle nor a circle, it's a cylinder. You just didn't have the three-dimensional perspective to see it. And this type of third-dimensional look is usually where I personally find interesting edges, and whether it be agronomy, whether it be design, whether it be the way that we sell the products. And that's where I really think that finding a way to quantify energy, if you can, and if you can't, to quantify the differences in what possibly could generate energy.
Like BDE, bus driver energy.
Yeah. So individual representatives are a perfect form of this, and why certain collabs and what do they call them? Brand ambassadors work perfectly. If that person is synergistically magnifying the energy that this product artistically and technologically produces, then it amplifies the message. If it's inauthentic, if it's antagonistic.
Well, I think that's what people who are projecting stuff into the market don't realize. They lack, not that they lack, but they underestimate the consumer's like sniff test or their taste test. That like, no.
Sophistication of the consumer and their ability to differentiate.
They don't think they can. They're like, no, people, especially, I mean, working in content creation, people are striving so much for authenticity. If you went up there and said, I'm a former drug addict, and now I've done this, and people are like, oh my God, like this person had the balls to open up and say the things about their past that aren't their best things about them, and able to exemplify those in a way that you or I, no matter how low or how far you've come, you can make it and get success in that. People eat that shit up. They are just craving that. And, again, people, and rightfully so. I mean, these are investors in business, and they want to protect, what they're going to do and what's the safe option, the easy option. But there's just so many amazing stories and so many amazing things that they can still go after. And the consumer wants that.
Yeah.
And the consumer is just, dying for it. Kylie Jenner with Pepsi going to a protest, saying that we're all one, like, it flops because no one is buying that shit.
Exactly. It's a perfect example, and then even more so when the messaging itself is so inauthentic that it looks laughable, the entire scene, the way it played out, like everything about that advertisement, it was a miss. Other than here's a popular person we're going to put into it. And I think that's really what you're seeing in a lot of markets is, one, consumers understanding the difference, but two, a lot of industry not willing to innovate, whether artistically or in their quality of product, enough to separate themselves. So what you have is, just like in the cannabis industry, a wholesale-focused industry that is all about providing enough movement in sales so that your investors are happy. Nobody's actually making money in legal cannabis right now. Nobody is actually building a brand built on a solid foundation.
It's a big statement right there. I mean, I have people messaging me all the time. What cannabis stock should I invest in? Cannabis has got to be on the move. Canadian cannabis stock.
My first question I ask everybody, what stock have you seen when you got the earnings report that made money? Okay, didn't make money because they made all this expansion. Let's take out the expansion. What was their operating cost? What was their EBITDA? Like how much money they make after like operations and things. Before we talk about, let's say real estate investment and blah, 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 infrastructure. Nobody publicly traded is net positive.
No one.
Not a single company. You cannot buy a public stock that is net positive. One. Two, you cannot buy a public stock that is producing in an area that will actually produce cannabis in the future. If you're growing in California, you're not going to be a mass producer. You can't keep up with Mexico. You can't keep up with Brazil. You can't keep up with Colombia. And when it's federally regulated, you're going to be able to import thousands of pounds of Colombian for cheaper than you could ever produce in the U.S.
But how does that go against California being this hub and mecca for...
So you can't invest in California companies right now. You can only invest... That would be the best secondary option. You can only invest in a Canadian company.
Really?
You can't invest in American cannabis. It's not a
So where are they getting their money from?
Canada. So Canada has federally legal weed. This is different.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So because they have federally legal weed, they can export and import. You can invest because the banks are backed by the government. You can't invest in an American company here. It won't let you. It's not federally regulated. So you cannot invest in American cannabis right now. It's not possible. You can invest in Canadian companies, some of which have moved into American cannabis, which is a really interesting gray area. But you cannot invest into an American producing company. And you tell me what what agricultural good or what consumable good that you would want to invest in that's produced out of Canada.
Has Mexico legalized? Because I know they were in the process of going about legalizing most of their illegal substances or
I
drugs.
thought that was just Mexico City.
It was just Mexico City?
I think that was just Mexico City. But related to cannabis...
I had heard that, that they were in the process of doing that. I didn't know it was just Mexico City.
Yeah, I think that was like a gang-related thing. But
that's
medical
gonna be
cannabis...
a tough subject, going after fucking drug lords and saying, hey, all our shit's legal.
Well, it's interesting because they're really like... So they're playing the opposite at cannabis law is playing. We're going to make it really hard to get licensing, and you're all illegal. Even in legal cannabis, they're like, no, we'll legalize everything, and we'll make you flood yourself. Like, they know, like, in my opinion, it's genius. Because if you legalize the production of cannabis in California, all the small investors will ruin themselves because they can't keep up with the prices that big business will be able to go to. Mm-hmm. So if you make the operating costs very low, you'll actually flood out the small farmer. But by keeping it high, you at least give them a chance. Which is interesting, but the barrier to get in is a little too high for them to get in, so they set the fence at the perfect height right now, in my opinion. But yeah, going back to the whole, do you produce cannabis in Canada? Are you going to buy is there a specialty item that's specially produced in Canada that appeals to you? No.
Maple syrup.
I buy my maple syrup from an organic farm out of the northeast in the United States of America.
I'm being nice to Canadians.
But I would say almost nothing but Drake music. That's it. That's the only thing Americans buy out of Canada. Drake and Justin Bieber music.
You're lucky they're real nice.
And you can't invest in that.
Lucky Canadians are nice.
But you can't invest in that. And in my opinion, what's even worse is that the second you can get American products into Canada, they're going to flood their market, and it'll only be American products for high end, and it'll be Mexican products for the low end. And all these Canadian companies with their high, like American price of production are going to get decimated by an authentically cannabis or an authentically produced brand from a heritage area that's been growing cannabis, like California, with the California culture of coolness. If you're a cool kid in Canada, you're not going to want Canadian weed. You're going to want the American weed that's branded correctly. So realistically, in my opinion, you're going to see around the world two categories of cannabis: available cannabis that's cheap, packaged decent, and at the right price point, and you'll see designer. And there will be nothing in between.
I don't think that Americans realize that enough. And if they wanted to market, American products, cannabis is going to be massive. But we've done that with, music and other, pop cultural things like
everything related to art,
exported around the world, and actually getting to travel and live outside the world. Like, my favorite story is like this 13-year-old girl in Kuwait I was coaching. Which she had a hijab on, so it was this, but she's playing full basketball in it. A jersey over that, it's just such a sight to see. But she's like, Coach Brent, do you know about Coachella and this and that? And she's like, before the class started, like, I got my phone up and watching the live stream. I'm like, yeah, I've probably got 100 friends there. Yeah. I didn't say 100 friends there probably tripping their balls off. But I got 100 friends there and experiencing that. Just, oh my God, that's so cool. And it's just something that nobody here would ever expect or see, from to realize that's still a 13-year-old teenager in another part of the world. It's not just
people
a person.
Underestimate American privilege. We have access to so much fun money, sports. You know how much money we invest in youth sports?
But just events too, like you said, with like the carnival being the one thing that's been something in society.
You know
and
what's
culture.
crazy is you referenced your local church's carnival, which is bigger than probably anything they do in Kuwait, as far as theme parks.
I mean, I bungee jumped on the beach. So.
They have theme parks in Kuwait? Well, you were there for years. You ever saw a single theme park?
No. Dubai, yes.
But I'm saying this is, like I say, Dubai is one of these very rare world destinations now. It's a multi-billion dollar
UAE
place.
In general, because you go to Abu Dhabi.
But I would say Kuwait is more realistically an average world country where it has progressive first world.
One of the highest currency values in the world.
But it's not a place where it has the art scene that a place like, let's say, Italy or the U.S. would have.
Yeah, that's due to the culture and the religion.
For sure. So like, our culture gives us a privilege of freedom, of choice, of experience that most places in the world either don't have the money.
Well, people don't even realize is the Constitution. Like, just your right to assemble freely, like, open right to assemble and protest. Like, there's no other country in the world where it's on the record to say you can do this here. The fact that you can do this here, I want anybody to go out.
It's so protected. The last time we used our National Guard was to protect protesters. This is the first time in decades we've ever used them to police protesters. So constitutionally, historically, you would be very correct. I would say currently you're seeing the first American president embraced a fascist dictatorship style of approach of managing freedom of speech and organization.
I wouldn't say full-on fascist dictatorship. I would say
It's that approach.
It's the approach because he's, again, teetering the line. I think Dan Carlin had a great, he reposted one of his older episodes, when Obama, I think, droned one of those American citizens, or a former American citizen, or was like, lost his citizenship in Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
And just exercising that power, and just, we're not necessarily seeing that now, but it's just how far, because the executive branch has been gaining power, for the past 40 years in terms of what they can do and how much executive powers they just override and oversign of the Congress to say, like, there's no problem pushing that envelope.
This is the closest thing, factually, an executive branch has had powers-wise to a dictatorship, and the way in which he's using federal police is how he's using them as police.
Unmarked police,
too. So there's military and unmarked police, which is only found in what governments? Fascist dictatorships. So, like I said, it may not be a textbook example, but it is out of the playbook. He's stealing pages 3, 5, and 7, and he's like, "I'm gonna use them," and it's something that's pretty consistent throughout his campaign and his enforcement of his policies. It's in line with all of these. The separation of children.
What's unbelievable
doesn't happen in most documents.
I don't think
any document.
It's like he doesn't actually believe in that, but the base, like to push the base.
He doesn't believe in anything. So start with there. He believes in nothing. So what does he believe in? Getting what he wants. So when you have a selfish, get what I want perspective, your approach is malleable. It's super flexible. It can change day to day. You have no values. You have no spine. You're a jellyfish. So this jellyfish can do whatever he wants to get what he wants. So once that situation occurs, it's going to fall out. The left and right will make their positions known. Easy. How can I use my leverage to get more of what I want? And if you follow that analysis, every single one of them is the factual, logical next move. So
yeah, I just don't think the left has been building their case up enough and countering with the correct things to...
What if I told you Donald Trump's more left than Obama?
I thought...
His budget's bigger.
Yeah.
His spending on every arena is bigger.
Well, I just don't think there's that much of a difference. Like you said, when we say, like, we talked about the farming and the spending that we do on agriculture and the amount of...
He socialized agriculture.
Completely socialized it with the amount of money we've used in these trade wars.
That's more left.
Yeah, it's more left. But in terms of the difference between the two is like this gray area where Democrats and Republicans exist, it's still like not that much outside of each realm and each realm.
But what if I told you that, and I'll do this for the camera, that this is left, this is right, both of them are here, and there's nothing here.
On that far right?
There's nothing in the middle right.
In terms of policy, in terms of
the way they use policy, which is more important in my opinion. How the policy is originally formulated, sure. Like, this is more liberal than that, and that's more conservative.
Oh, then they don't actually exercise conservative policy.
Doesn't exist.
No.
There is no budgeted. There is no states' rights first. There is no...
Oh, they completely socialize big business, where big business is able to completely leverage the government for themselves when they say, hey, government's not good. We want less government, but... what is his name? Mark Zuckerberg has 20,000 lobbyists working for him around D.C. to make sure policy and the government is leveraged in his favor.
What was interesting is they capitalized regulation, socialized recovery. Does that make sense?
Repeat that.
So they capitalized regulation, which is supposed to be a check on capitalism.
It's true, yeah.
And then they socialized recovery, which in my opinion is a feature of capitalism. So, for example, when a $1 billion plane company goes under, instead of bailing them out, let them fail. Now, what happens when a big business fails? Does everybody lose their job? Does this economy disappear? Or does somebody else in the plane sector buy it up for pennies on the dollar and hopefully restructure in a more sustainable, profitable, and if everything, in my opinion, is in the right priorities, the workers are organizing as well to make sure that their new experience is progressive for them as well. And when you allow recovery not to be socialized, you force innovation.
Oh, no, I can totally agree. And I think that's where we are. It's this generational divide and gap we have, that we had this success from, the 1950s in business industry up to, we'll just say even 9/11, and, through society and culture of this uptick, even though it actually got even more pulled apart in terms of, the haves and have-nots in our society. But it's like this generational divide, and what they've done to most people, economically lean conservative, is just like to say, and which to say is us, and we both get called communists and socialists. That
I'm the biggest socialist communist that ever believed in states' rights and strict constitutionalism you ever met. I'm the only person who's reading and citing the Constitution, but somehow I'm a liberal.
And who grows their own cannabis and grows cannabis.
Grows my own hemp. Yeah. I live closer to George Washington than anybody you know, but somehow I'm a lib. I don't know. I do have liberal. What I would say is I do have liberal people policies.
Socially.
I would say even, I would just say people, because it goes outside of social. It goes to their own economic and government rights as human beings, like how they operate personally. So I would say it's a little more than social. It's not only how I interact with them, is I want them to have the same rights white males get. And the difference being is I actually have a right not to be illegally searched or detained. People love talking about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. How about the Fourth Amendment? There's a bunch more. So the Fourth Amendment,
don't know what the Fourth Amendment
this
is.
right to not be illegally detained. When a cop stops you on the street, ask him, "Are you detaining me?" No? Fuck you.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to stop you. This is why they fought the American Revolution, because back in those days.
And even better, you don't even have to respect them. You can tell them to go fuck you. That's your
First Amendment right allows you to tell him to go fuck himself. And then, on top of that, let's compare it to where this came from, right? Let's stay strict with it. The British could stop you at any time, tell you what to do, and search your things.
Well, and go and demand quarters, where they could go and stay in your home and take your home.
Hold you for as long as they wanted to. All of these things, which we found to be reprehensible and we wanted to form a government so that people could not do this to us. And instead, the biggest argument you hear is, these people or that person or this group or these individuals shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z because the police officer said they couldn't. That's not the law. That's not the way it works. They don't have a right to show up to places and take control of things. They're not allowed to even enter your private property without certain rights and certain warrants
from a judge,
or in certain extenuating circumstances. So I think this lack of understanding even what we're talking about in 95% of conversations is the biggest issue in talking politics, because more oftentimes than not, this person doesn't have an opinion. They have a prepackaged speech presented to them from CNN or Fox News or some guy on Twitter or some dude with a selfie cam on Facebook. And these are progressively worse and worse sources, and even more so, the lack of anybody's willingness to critically think or do some diligence themselves is, even sounding me talking about it makes me exhausted.
Yeah.
So it's something that most people don't care to do.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest problem that's happened, and certain facets of our society. That's just where power has accumulated with a small amount of people. And I think the biggest place is politics, where, either the amount of civics that isn't taught or civics that is understood by the general population, that, you put so much trust into individuals, but they're human beings, and human beings, we know, take power, and they run with power, and they're going to leverage and accumulate resources and money and time for themselves. And we've seen that in politics where, we represent millions or tens of millions of people, and they got a little selfish and greedy with their jobs. And we're seeing that politics is not actually representing the grandiose scale of people, whether it's in their district or their cities, their states, or the entire general population. So it's unfortunate, but sometimes we have to it's going to go this far back. And I think people are realizing like how big of a trench that people in power have, the beachhead that they have to say, oh, you want to change policy? You want to change this? Go ahead. Try. It's so hard to do.
What's interesting, you say this, but I have to say, I feel the opposite. In my opinion, the American system is so easy. You can now influence millions of people with a single video. We have distributed the ability to influence, one, which is not only done with money anymore, which is very interesting. And two, we've become more accountable than ever. It's very interesting. We grew up with our parents saying our generation was the least accountable. That's a track presidents over time, right?
Don't get me started on the older generation. They're the worst.
But I just wanna reflect on, they were a part of this era and how we've become more accountable with everybody. So it started with technology. When we could record a president, Nixon gets held accountable. All of a sudden...
Well, that was the big thing with Kennedy and Nixon, that first televised debate they had. In that election, you see Nixon just sweating buckets and bullets. His tie is too tight. He's losing his mind. And you see Kennedy, and you see his charisma, and you see his look and his glow. And it just completely helped him make that unbelievable win, which was a massive upset at the time.
For sure. And then you go, so let's take it another... let's fast forward a little bit. Computers are invented. We can now access news on a daily basis. We can now not only hear the latest gossip, get it from a decent source, get additional details.
No, people are not looking at their sources, man. We both know this.
But hear me out.
They can, but they aren't.
Every president before Bill Clinton probably had an extramarital affair. Most of them probably did so in the White House. Who was the first one held accountable for it?
Bill Clinton.
Why? Not because he's special. Any president doing these types of activities are going to have that accountability. The internet taught us we can tell about you to everybody in the country in an afternoon. We can make it world news by tomorrow morning. The TV doesn't even really need to be on because we can publish articles on a website. Change the way we hold people who we can never hold accountable. So accountable. His personal sexual activity affected his political life. Let's go a step further. Let's look at Obama. Obama was held so accountable. We can find clips of Fox News criticizing his use of tan suit, ketchup stains, tripping.
My favorite is Glenn Beck saying that there is a Muslim caliphate coming to this country and literally fearing people. And I'm like, guys.
So he attempted to hold Obama accountable, right? How much of a clown? He's lost his job his entire career. The world held him accountable for this farces, these lies. This era of accountability is here. Rush Limbaugh, if he was a new person, wouldn't survive this. And that's why I think he's dying off. So you're starting to see this high reaction environment. What happened on Facebook the other day? With
that guy?
Yeah.
Our guy in Davie?
How much accountability was thrown at his doorstep for the first time in his life? So for the first time now, what Trump has done by making so many people angry, and Obama did it first because he angered so many conservatives for their biases and prejudices, in my opinion. But because he was held so accountable for everything he did, Trump, because he is so controversial, we're doing it even harder now, to where you're seeing the younger generation, especially kids younger than us, holding their parents accountable for everything they telling on the creepy uncle.
That's me. We're gonna catch you, parents.
Putting out every person, and the good-minded, the good-hearted ones are doing it because they want to hold their parents accountable, like their parents held them accountable for their actions, and made us, I like to think, as critical thinkers and actually able to search for truth. Because when you're accountable for being correct, you are going to try to ensure that you're correct. Because if you're then shown to be correct, your efforts are rewarded by recognition and accountability. So accountability becomes a reward instead of damaging.
Yeah. Well, I
so
think
the
that's
more
the
we can do that.
I wrote the blog post on that where it's just like most of our parents' generation, even if they did go to college or stay college, it wasn't to the the extent that we got held accountable for high school and college. I mean, even at Pinecrust, I mean, it was like, this is not your original idea to 6 words of a line, they never actually, expelled anybody, but it was just like the fear they put in you. And then going to college and having to write a 50-page thesis paper on fascism in Italy in 1918, and it was like, I gotta put together 50 pages of my own shit?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm not gonna graduate.
And a
I'm
lot
not
of it's
gonna
got to be cited by reputable sources.
Footnotes,
who went,
cited.
who-
I had to get
who-
like 25 sources of digging.
when they check your source and they read that thing you're quoting actually relates.
But like that's the most important thing, and like besides civics, you know, people not understanding the actual basis of our country, how it came to be, what makes up, you know, the things that hold you and guarantee you certain safeties and securities that, you know, people just never even had that certain level of, you know, again, what the internet just say you're doing. I see your point with that, and I totally agree with that. But also that, you know, how our generation is actually so accountable is that we were
so
forced
check
to
this
look
out
at
though.
that.
So with this accountability,
Remember, 30% of Americans, 33% I think, have college degrees. That went through the entire process of being held their feet to the fire. And I think there's so many correlations that we can look at that with numbers of, you know, how
we make less per job per hour. We are held more accountable. We get less breaks.
Yeah.
And what I would say is not only that, but over time, when you can create a culture of accountability, you'll have a higher performance innovation area. But what ends up occurring is the more we innovate, the more we hold leaders accountable, and the more convenience we create, the more willing the average individual is okay with losing personal rights, is okay with reducing accountability upon themselves, is okay with creating a shadow, as the Reese family has taught me much about.
Shadow effect, it's real.
I truly believe that this whole, you hold people accountable for what you really dislike in yourself the most, ends up becoming an easy thing to do and becomes very comfortable because, one, you get to judge people for the same things you're doing, but in a way that you can hold them accountable. There's no reverse accountability, so that's very easy and enjoyable. But two, the way we're progressing as a world is the reason why the United States of America has less accountable individuals on average than a place like South America, because the better off you are and the better off you start, the less accountability you desire. If I can just keep this the same and have no accountability, that'd be great. I have no downside. I don't have to actually produce. I can have no expectation. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because if you follow Buddhism, they talk about eliminating expectation is true happiness. So are we pursuing happiness or productivity? Are we pursuing happiness for the population? Or are we pursuing productivity? Because at some level...
We're pursuing productivity. I mean, I'm even a victim and guilty of this.
Mm-hmm.
Just escaping feelings and emotions and just life in general by drowning yourself through work and drowning yourself through projects or attempts or even other jobs to make money. And it's just like, well, where is this going? Where is the desire? I think there is a desire that I do enjoy life that much and filling my time up with all these different adventures, activities, and that being ways that I actually get to describe who I am and how I get to live life. I'm still lucky and fortunate, but again, that is a perspective and mindset and just years of craziness. But at the same time, I think I'm totally caught up in this. There's definitely a superficial way about it, because it's like, you want money, you want clout, you want, a certain level.
Influence. You want people to care about what you're doing and saying.
Influence, as much as I want to grant influence to others and give them availability and opportunity and, be like a beacon to say, hey, wake up tomorrow and start something. You live in America. You can do it, and it's really easy to get after it. It's not going to be easy in terms of getting there, but to start, we have the easiest entry to start.
The most privileged
to
be
succeed?
successful
I don't
in the
know.
world. Yeah, whether or not you're going to do it is something. And what's interesting is a lot of the stuff that I've learned is the juxtaposition of happiness and productivity end up focusing on one thing, which is where they join, which is if you can remain present. And that's it.
It's hard.
And that's it. Because if you can be present, what you're doing is productive. And if you stay present, you'll stay focused on the most relevant things. And you'll be more willing to be empathetic and understanding. And you'll be more willing to do what needs to be done, because it's the only thing that needs to be done. And realistically, most of your stresses come from things that happened to you before, and you're worried about them happening again, or they might happen soon. So you're thinking about the past or worrying about the future.
Which one produces anxiety and which one produces stress? Thinking of the past is supposed to be stressful, and thinking about the future generates anxiety.
From my understanding, now what I would say is
I mean, again, it's a wide range, filter to put on that. But
yeah, no, but I think anxiety is prefaced in this anticipation thing, which indicates future tense, and I think stress indicates something that's previously happened to you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good perspective on it. But I would even move it to far as to say, they're inevitable when doing either. If you are reflecting about how you presently feel about something that's happened previously, you're still doing a present action. However, if you allow previous things to influence your present moment, you're no longer present. Does that make sense?
One more time.
So if you are reflecting on your past and how that's influencing you currently, you're spending time. So, for example, this one a brain surgeon talks about how the space in your mind is the infinite field.
Oh, the one who runs our housing and development projects now? Ben Carson?
No, not him. Although he had a great interview on NPR about how visiting the homeless in LA has changed his entire perspective on what we need to do for the homeless.
Yeah, I think
you guys should check that out, because it's a perfect example of somebody who is present and still open-minded enough that when he visited and as a healthcare professional, he had his honest opinion. He said he wants to change the entire Trump administration approach to how they handle this issue. Yeah. So I think it just shows you, like, even people who I may not vibe with or agree on many things, I'm supportive of people who are open-minded and present enough to see things, be empathetic.
Have a grain of empathy that they can look at that and say, oh.
Well, I dare say, if you hear his interview, he has more than a grain. He's like, this, as a medical
professional.
professional.
I was talking about generally, but yeah.
Generally you'll get a grain, like, oh, this is an issue we need to look at. But he was more so like, as a medical professional, this shouldn't happen in America. So he was like.
Have you made it out there? I mean, I know one of your new businesses is out in that area.
Yeah, I'm there every day.
Yeah,
so for the past 6-7 months, I would say, we spend a lot of our lunches in this area, either walking through or driving through.
It is amazing.
It's just wild to see how much people are willing willing to subsist and keep going through having in my opinion, one of the biggest problems in the country is that the first hill is massive. Most people make it over that hill, but the ones that don't, we just leave, and it's like a tragedy because it is a significant hill and we have the resources to stop it. But getting back to the whole present thing, if you're able to not allow your past to influence your present, and for example, let's say you've had a bad interaction with people calling you stupid, and you're working and somebody's like, yo, that's really stupid, and you have a reaction, an emotional reaction, you need to understand that your emotional conditioning is playing in your programming, and that you're allowing the past to play a programmed response, to waste up your bandwidth on a programmed response from before. Because really, if somebody's like, yo, that's stupid, like, he's not actually calling you stupid. Like, if you were present in the moment, you would see that this application, but if it hits on something you've emotionally and experienced negatively before, you're allowing the past to influence your present. Now, if I go home and I think about this moment that just happened and how I was emotionally triggered by this comment, and I go, man, I have a problem with people calling me stupid. I'm insecure about being stupid. You know what? When people call me stupid, I'm going to try to laugh about that because I know that it's me being silly. And the next time you've, in that present moment, gone into your infinite realm and you've changed programming. This is an active, not a passive activity. This is an active activity. You have to be engaged for this. You have to make this change. Then you got to live that change. And as you live that change and you stay present in the moment, so the next time you're stupid, you're able to laugh because you invested emotionally and logically into a new form, and the more you repeat that physically in the real world, you'll replace that conditioning. You've used a moment of presence for yourself, where you actively substituted a conditioned response instead of allowing this past thing to play all the time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So like whenever you yell at somebody on the highway, you're triggered by something else. Like it's not somebody cutting you off on the highway that pisses you off. Especially
I have Christ-like empathy, so it just doesn't happen. Like, I can just that person's going
whether
through
it be
stuff.
some people I've seen it like the waiter looks at you and walks by you and doesn't bring you the water. Whatever it may be, being ignored might be your trigger. You need to address that emotional conditioning that's made up your personality.
Oh, completely.
And people got to be willing to address this. So this personal accountability is usually the biggest obstacle, but the biggest tool that people can use to find presence in their life. Like you will be happier. I can promise you if you can stay present. Why? Because you're going to be absorbing energy that is life.
And we love reality.
And I dare
Reality's
say,
great.
but if you can enjoy reality, is to do so moment by moment.
Yeah. I mean, we're just...
You're not programmed to do that.
You're not programmed to, and then we're just bombarded. I mean, just look at the room we're sitting in. Look at the lights, the colors, the microphones. Our attention's supposed to be focused in on one spot, but I mean, the detail just in this room is just... How do I stay with it? How do I just stay on one thing? And it's, we forget how animal we are.
Yeah.
When we don't look at things like that and realize, like, the dog, comes in the house and it's like, holy shit, smell, look, where.
So what's
where,
interesting
here.
is they say that animal instinct is emotional conditioning, and it's built in the strongest conditioning you have, which is survival. Survival conditioning is if something reaches a level of danger that you prioritize as survival, it instantly goes to the top of the warning list. Things that make you pleasure aren't prioritized. It's not going to kill you. It's not necessary for evolution. So the highest things of priority are fight or flight risk, survival-like conditioning. And in America, in such a privileged, mostly safe place to live, we have an immense amount of unnecessary negative conditioning.
I think like porn is like one of the biggest ones, because that's like another biological thing. We have to go out there and seek partner to replicate our genes, and we are like,
instead of handling stress in a productive way, we do it through a very oppressive way. Even watching porn is an oppressive thing. You're using people's love or faked love to give something for yourself.
I mean, think about the amount of advantage. We got Louis Smalls coming back. He's going to be here on Saturday.
Okay. I was wondering where that example came from. I was like,
no. I've also been a part of a few petitions, and I've been reaching out to the woman putting the petitions together to remove Pornhub from the internet. And because, like a lot of the accessibilities in business we talked about, who runs these businesses and who runs these things? That
should you be removing Pornhub from the internet, or should you be educating individuals on the difference?
Because of the amount of human trafficking and people being taken advantage of in this space and industry, whether those people are youth or they're minors.
Okay.
And so that is the intention of doing that. And it's not to remove it, it's to, again,
regulate
a little bit more in terms of we're dealing with the minors and youth. I'm not against porn. I think you better.
I just think it's a free speech thing. It's an amendment thing for me. How do you regulate that? I would say if statistics show that regulating it would reduce crime, like there's a way to do that. But you have to show that to infringe on the First Amendment, I would say.
I mean, that's what her research and her books and everything.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think, and again, another documentary you watch. Have you seen Hot Girls Wanted?
No.
That will make you second guess watching porn like ever again. Yeah. It is, I think it's made in 2015 or released in 2015. It may have happened a little bit before that. And it's just this one guy who is, not the pimp, but he's the manager.
Yeah.
Makes those Craigslist posts in Oklahoma.
He's a pimp.
Or Texas. He's a pimp. And he's putting on there, hey, looking for models, XYZ, certain amount of dollars a week. And these are, girls who are just getting out of the house, away from their family, that little bit of freedom they have to know, oh, I'm making $1,000 a week? Yeah, fuck my parents.
Yeah.
Fuck Oklahoma. I'm going to go make it.
Yeah.
And then you get slowly coaxed into, actually, this is the scene we want you to do, and we're going to pay you this, and we'll give you $2,000 if it came inside of you. And it's just like, and you're just watching these girls crumble under this pressure of being in the real world and doing business for the first time, and it's their body and their image, and it's like it's intense. And of course, where does it take place?
California?
Miami, baby.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
And again,
No,
I'm not cheering, but it's like
that's
it's
what
on Netflix. It's a Netflix original.
Okay. And I would say that it's
But I'm totally with you on the free speech in terms of people being adults and being able to be representative and to stand up.
Educate your children about this before they experience sex. Accountability. Parents don't want accountability for sex education. I haven't met any parent, very few, who want the responsibility of educating their children about sex, who want to educate their male youth about the responsibility of being a biologically larger individual, the responsibility of being a gentleman. These things they don't want the accountability. And in my opinion,
completely. I mean,
parents
think about
aren't
where you
held
learned your
accountable
sexual
enough.
education from. Where did you learn your sex ed from? Did you learn it from
Most people learned it online.
Online?
And their friends.
You had a friend who had an older sibling who knew more about things. You hear about curse words, which lean towards some kind of sometimes like something representative of sex, whether it's the word fuck or gay or faggot. Like those are words you learn. You're like, oh, you can't use those.
And almost every single one of them are derogatory. The
the
three
most
you used.
derogatory.
The three you used. One is used to mean harm, even though it also means sex. And the other two are both used to be neutral terms and positive terms in the term of gay, who have been kind of perverted into detrimental insults. But yeah, I think all of these topics all go back to this: do individuals in America want to be held accountable for their own actions? Do they want to hold their leaders accountable? And I think that what we can really, in my opinion, what I consider to be the highest priority is things like in government, things like the most essential parts of our economy, like agronomy. And I think cannabis is going to be bigger than cotton, bigger than tobacco, bigger than alcohol. So when you're talking about
bigger than corn,
of course, when hemp seed becomes the nutritional thing that it's going to be, watch. It's a better filler than corn nutritionally all day. So I think you're going to see it overtake everything as America's cash crop. You're going to start seeing this prioritization of how the essential businesses, for me, the biggest issues, all those, what I would say, social and private issues, are usually ones of intellectual banter and not something you can actually regulate.
Yeah.
I like looking at the things that are essential businesses, essential to infrastructure, essential to economy, essential to quality of life, and that's usually where the government and big business intersect, and it's usually how we regulate those businesses and then how those businesses can operate in a private arena to where they're adding value that a government never could. And those are the most interesting areas for me, but what's interesting is the most influential areas like tech, social media, are, because of their private influence, are now the biggest issues in regulation. How do we regulate Facebook? How do we regulate Twitter? How do we regulate the spread of information? How do we regulate new economies like cannabis? Or
in factual information. What factual information are you allowed?
How about the fact that if you were to take a picture of I think it's 1 in 3 Donald Trump tweets, post them onto Facebook, they will get taken down, and Facebook will not allow you to post them because they're factually incorrect. And so factually incorrect that you're not allowed to make that representation, but the President of the United States is, because it's an official transpondence from our government.
What is the difference between that being an infringement on his First Amendment rights of free speech and this being a private company, they can do whatever the fuck they want?
So let's talk about First Amendment rights. They teach us in law school. Where is it public or private speech? What type of public or private speech is it? So, for example, we've got, in this case, Facebook and Twitter are private entities. So you are going to a private venue. It's like if the Miami Dolphins, instead of Facebook, you had to go to the stadium and talk to people and post things up on the wall. That's what Facebook is. It's a physical location. It is. That's what people don't get. It's a physical location in the world of law. So in this physical location,
the only difference between that and a virtual world is like you're not entering in it, but you're viewing it.
No, you're entering. If you're on it with an account, you're in it.
A what's it called? Augmented or virtual world. But I mean, once it's there, it's going to look like that, where you're like, let me look at these posts on these walls.
In this example, pretend that's the way
it is.
Of
course.
Because legally it is.
Yeah,
right?
I'm excited for that world.
So legally, you live in Facebook because you have an account there. Your person is there 24/7. People can contact that person. They can bother that person. They can poke that person.
That is an augmented reality version of you.
Exactly. So this is a place. In this private place, the company who owns this private place has the right to create guidelines and user agreements that will limit your activity however they seem fit. The Constitution does not apply to private areas.
Is it the First or Second Amendment where they say, like, no business will enforce religious or certain things? I don't know if that's the First or Second Bill of Rights, right?
Oh,
there.
you're allowed to do whatever you want.
No, in terms of, like, government cannot
impose upon that. Separation of church and state, I'd have to do a little more research because that's touching on more.
But we're totally not doing separation of church and state.
I don't think that's a constitutional amendment. I think that's a policy.
Bill of Rights.
I don't think it's in the Bill of Rights either.
I forgot what the exact...
I don't think it's an enumerated thing is what I'm saying. There's a lot of research, and when they were drafting a lot of documents, that they had support for this idea, but it was never enumerated, and I could be mistaken.
I'd look at the language of it because I'm not doing a good job explaining the exact language.
No, I know what you're talking about, too. I'm just not educated enough on this particular topic. But... jumping back, where were we?
We're going on. You're in this virtual world, and like.
So
you know,
you're publishing. You're in a private place.
The can't say like, hey.
So where does your First Amendment right kick in? It kicks in all public places, and in certain public places, it's even more protected, like public forums, like in front of the town hall, like in front of the court. These places are extremely protected, sacred places. So when the police come and they try stopping your protest. And in front of these extremely protected public spaces, this is an invasion of the First Amendment right. Taking down your post from a private entity is like if you walked into Dolphin Stadium and put up a poster and they said, nah, this is coming down. Why? Because we don't want you to have it up. They can take it down for any reason. Now, let's talk about what's interesting about this, is when you do this and you start regulating speech,
of course, it gets messy.
You become liable as an editor. So...
that's the thing a lot of people, conservatives, were saying, that, hey, if you're going to be doing this,
you're an editor, you need to be held liable for everything everybody says. You're going to be held liable for the content of everything. So what Facebook has tried to do is say we're not editors, everything is automated. That's why everything got up during the last election, because they refused to vet anything. So this is free speech.
Yeah.
Because they knew if they vetted then it got so bad with the factual Russia disinformation campaign and the amount of fake Facebook accounts, the amount of hacking they did, the amount of misrepresentation they did, the amount of shares and views this misrepresentation got. They were told by Congress that Congress made a law that imposed this upon them. You can restrict private companies' ability to regulate themselves with a congressionally passed bill that has convinced the population, and unless you are impeding upon their freedoms, very rarely do these types of laws get struck down when there's a need. So right now we're in this very interesting place that we can either hold social media accountable for content and treat them as editors, which I believe has to be done. They've always been editors. How do I know? When I start a weed page on your platform, you take it down. Or if I skew it into some sort of content.
Or even people with nudity.
People with nudity. All these different lines that aren't clear-cut end up becoming judgment calls. And if you're making judgment calls, that's a definition of an editor to me. So even though they've tried to mechanize it so it's not editorial, this is where it's ended up. And more so is that we've created a public forum owned by a private company. So this is the interesting conversation, is that we've created the most used public forum are private companies. So we either, one, have to impose First Amendment rights upon them as if they're public entities, which can never happen because of the way we protect private property in the United States, or we impose legislation that directly attributes a certain usage of communication to qualify as you're an editorial now. You actually control the content because of, remember we had that YouTube conversation, why are they able to prioritize NBC? Because they have editorial content. They can prioritize whatever they want. Their algorithm doesn't have to be fair. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be if they don't want it to be.
No, of course.
Now they use an algorithm because it allows them to argue they're not editorializing, but they are. And this is the game. Is if you take people out of it, it's not subjective editorialism. It's fact-based rules from our user agreement. So this is the legal kind of positioning they play. But really what it comes down to is now you're seeing for the first time in history that we're having to regulate private speech because it's become a public forum. So I think you're going to see very interesting, whether it be rights to the internet in general.
Well, like you're saying, this is like a whole new schism that's happening within the public forum because it's privately owned now. The biggest, excuse me, not privately owned, but the biggest public forum is in a private space. So now it's just pushing over and they're overlapping, and we have to find a way to regulate that.
Yeah, Twitter's a perfect example because, for example, if we held Twitter accountable, they would have to delete Trump's tweets. How crazy is that? Official correspondence from the government would have to get deleted because it would violate their rules. But because they're not editorial and he's a government entity, it supersedes the rules because they're not editorializing. Does that make sense?
So they're avoiding
responsibility. They're
and
shirking accountability is what it is. So when big business is shirking accountability for what they're influencing, this is an easy way to tell when you need regulation.
Well, it's like the biggest thing with the USDA and like beef and like cattle or just like any of the meat processing in general. Like for 70 to 80% of that meat that's getting processed, there's a dude right there in a white coat who's looking over that meat process to make sure that they're not putting extra hooves in your ground beef.
Whatever it may be.
Anything in. So like that is where the regulation is good. That is where...
Because the industry showed, and where did it come from? They found...
1906.
What they found is that they
Sinclair.
didn't create this accountability.
No,
quality
Mike,
would
you
be
don't know about
disease
libertarianism.
level.
The free market will take care of itself, man.
It doesn't.
I know.
It doesn't. What it does more times than not is it allows those in power to leverage their power and make more money and accumulate resources. And they're going to do so at the detriment, as much of a detriment that doesn't cost them money, because when you're taking things away from your costs, and usually people, your labor costs, you save money right there. That's found profits.
That's my favorite part about libertarians. Like, okay, yeah, great, we all want freedom and independence, and
Who's going to regulate your waterways? Who's going to make sure the water, like regulation is why you have clean water everywhere other than in low-income areas and minority areas like Flint, Michigan, because... And this is because there isn't accountability for this on a federal level. Clean water is a federal issue. Now, figuring...
Do we federally make sure there's something that happens there? We take care of the water?
So one of the strongest legislation that Obama passed is a bunch of environmental stuff, which it's increased our federal protection of waterways.
Has Trump pulled all that back?
He's tried every single day since the first day. One of the first things he started on was his golf courses couldn't use these very harmful pesticides
because of runoff
into the streams, and he was trying to overthrow that one first. Interestingly enough, how that got to the top of his priority list.
Unbelievable.
But this was one of the first things he attempted to do.
That's when he had, what's his name? Scott, who's the guy who ran the EPA, and then after a year...
Scott Pruitt?
I want to say that's his name.
Maybe.
Yeah, or it's the other guy from, I think, Pennsylvania or Texas. Perry.
Oil
was
people.
it Rick?
Rick Perry was after, I believe.
Yeah.
But all these people are in line with that. We all own property that use pesticides because we're not investing in innovative organic regenerative techniques, and we own the companies that sell the pesticides. So we make money off selling the pesticides, and we want to sell them to ourselves.
And we get subsidies from the government in order to
for
do
all
that.
of these different things. So it's something that is usually a multi-level problem that goes towards lack of accountability and usually a maximized leverage that has created an unfairness that isn't able to be overcome. It's too profitable to be overcome. That's the issue. Is why aren't shoes made regeneratively? There's a company called Veja who all of its organic cotton is produced with fair wages in Brazil, and they produce shoes at the same price point as Nike and everything else, completely sustainably, regeneratively, organically. Why doesn't Nike do it? Because it's too profitable to change. Nike would lose a shit ton of profits to change. So accountability, zero. Because they launch a regenerative product once a month.
That's what I love about that MJ meme, and they're perfect there.
Fuck them kids.
Fuck them kids.
and this is called greenwashing, to where you create enough green in your space so that accountability for actually being progressive is non-existent, and you get the upside of looking like regenerative or sustainable. This is the problem is hopefully the trend of increasing accountability solves the problem of greenwashing, solves the problem of fake involvement, fake support for progressive innovation, for whether it be individual human rights or whether it be economic development in new arenas.
Well, that allows me to jump back into the federal prohibition against cannabis still, because federally it's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think right there a lot of people don't know where that came from. It came from 1971 Nixon's drug laws and I forgot which drug law bill is called, but anyways,
Classified drugs.
Yeah, we started classifying the drugs, and
Yeah.
a lot of people who were out protesting, and as a way to crack down on different groups that he wanted to target, and he used that through.
You know who did that recently? Trump's been using DEA surveillance planes to crack down on protesters, by the way.
Dude, the amount of
just
air
another
traffic
example.
overhead, I've seen so many small single propeller planes in the past 3 or 4 weeks.
They did a great report on it's the federal
There's
government.
a BuzzFeed article, I think, that you guys shared. Yeah, the DEA is now, or Trump has pushed the DEA to start using different
surveillance techniques on civilians
whether
without
it's
warrants.
Your cell phone, whether it's airplanes. They're looking at everything now, so
and they're
smile for them.
Yeah, and they're able to do it because of the Patriot Act, which was invoked a week after 9/11 and never not renewed, which decreased our Fourth Amendment rights. Combined with, he's now trying to get Antifa. Antifa is not an organization. There is no organizational group. The problem with this is that when you label, if Antifa ever gets labeled a terrorist organization, anybody in a terrorist organization in the United States of America has no constitutional rights under the Patriot Act. If Antifa, an organization that isn't organized, can get qualified as such, anybody can be part of Antifa according to the person accusing you. So if Trump wants to call you like that 75-year-old guy, why did he call that guy an Antifa guy? Because he wants to be able to start labeling people Antifa, and they have no rights. We can get warrants. We can tap their phones. We can do all these things legally. They're trying to take away your rights using lies. Because people who think of themselves as Antifa have done crimes and committed crimes and perpetuated crime. Fact, fact, fact. You cannot create legal government police enforcement based on ideals and who you decide fits under those ideals. Versus the KKK isn't a terrorist organization, yet it is an organized group of individuals.
They're not deemed a terrorist organization?
Nope.
And he wants to put Antifa over the KKK.
Yep. They have an organization. They have a leader. They have decades history of violence credited to their organization. Differences here, right? Antifa does not have an organizational group.
And federally held office.
They literally still to this day regularly run for offices.
Well, they've held office. They've exposed people who are actually Klan members.
saying people who openly are Klan members running for office in local governments throughout the country. This is currently happening in places. So it's something that one, where it should be used isn't being used. And they say because of the danger of people getting citizens being labeled as terrorists as part of the KKK. So because it'll be so easy to take away people's rights, we won't do it with the KKK. The president wants to do it with Antifa, which, like I said, factually is not an organization, does not have a leader, and does not have members, and therefore is impossible to decide who is part of Antifa unless the person identifies themselves as Antifa, but that's not the definition the government uses. Mm-hmm. The government uses is if you're considered to be part of Antifa, and I wrote my law school graduation paper on the way that we take away terrorist rights in Guantanamo Bay, and how, for example, 2 British individuals were in Afghanistan researching their family history, got scooped up on a bus that had 20 Taliban on it. They were held in Guantanamo Bay for 2 years before they saw a lawyer.
There's an interesting Radiolab one. What was the kid's name? Anyway, the guy at Radiolab had the same name as him, and he followed his story as he was this peaceful kid from Libya. Somehow, when he moved to Sudan in the late 90s, he happened to be handling Osama bin Laden's entire watermelon fields, which he had 60 or 50 acres, and was working directly for Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
And so he's managing this land, and somehow he had ended up in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Years in Guantanamo Bay after he's captured, they said he was actually a general for the Taliban and running all this stuff. And they did this whole big 6-part series on it. Again, Radiolab crushes it.
And he was a watermelon farmer.
Well, that's the thing. After in the Obama administration, they were releasing people from Guantanamo.
Yeah.
He had his papers, their actual chief of staffs, but people with that kind of chief of staff clearance who manage who's going to be able to let go and get out of Guantanamo. They interviewed him. His lawyer's there. He passes the test. You're going to be released. Trump campaign happens, and they cut it off, and he's stuck there still.
That's wild.
To this day.
It's wild, and because he's not a citizen, and so those people get screwed the worst, and they're worried that these extremely inhumane practices. The judge, by the way, the Supreme Court, you know what their final ruling was? 2 years is too long. That's it.
People who can stay in Guantanamo?
For less than 2 years. You can do that. If they're not a citizen and circumstances make it seem he's a terrorist, you're allowed to hold them for 2 years without seeing a judge. Now, for American citizens, if they don't let you see a judge in 48 hours, they have to let you go free. And they cannot charge you with that crime unless additional evidence is provided.
That's good to know.
So if they don't let you out in 48 hours, you're good. They have to let you see a judge. Mm-hmm. So I said, wow. And my paper was about how in Israel, right, more terrorist attacks than anywhere else in the year, every year.
Really?
Attempts. They get a shit ton of attempts. Yeah. Closest proximity to an organized armed enemy trying to perpetuate these attacks. More deaths per person related to terrorism than any other country in the world, like based on how many people die relative to their population. They have more respective laws of the terrorists they capture. You have to see a lawyer within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So this is in a place where are more oppressive to who they consider military combatants, higher need, higher danger, 2 years versus 2 weeks. And what people are underestimating here, they're trying to apply this to American citizens so that they can do this to you. And they can call you Antifa, and then they can hold you for 2 years. That would be the legal ramifications. That's a factual legal assessment. How do I know? That's how I graduated law school. They wouldn't have let me out if the 40-page paper with citations that I wrote on this topic didn't get okayed and approved, and it was one of the higher grades I got. Frankly, just because I think the topic is shockingly straightforward. That we have this history of all this government history that even non-citizens should get these rights. But the Patriot Act gives us an exemption where in this case, terrorists are so bad and so mean and so dangerous, we should treat them like non-humans.
So in the case of, let's say, the federal drug bill that we did that, and actually we exported our drug laws around the world. So I think it's like almost 100 countries in the world. Like if we were to legalize weed federally, that would impact like 100 other countries in terms of how they write and how we've exported and made deals around the world.
Yes and no. What a lot of people don't realize is most deals, when something invalidates them, can be rewritten exactly the same minus a sentence or two. Mm-hmm. That would happen really quickly. A lot of those countries are not going to change.
How close are we federally then to getting something like that
Next
dropped?
administration. Trump would veto it. I think he said that.
I thought he said he's been...
No.
Something he's been considering.
No. He does that when election time comes. But if you hit him on any other time, no. No. He even thought about rolling. He tried to roll back. So
Has Biden said he would...
yeah. But what's interesting...
He says?
Yeah. Yeah.
Joseph?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Joseph.
And what's interesting...
Sleepy.
Yeah, right? But what's interesting is, so under Obama, because states started legalizing, he had the Justice Department put out a memo. This is a famous memo.
Where they were going to hinder the amount of arrests the DEA could actually go into.
We will no longer pursue any charges against licensed state operators. Basically saying, you guys can do this. It is federally sanctioned.
Because I think early in the Obama administration, there were just raids going on.
Well, they could, because legally they were operating.
But there were a lot happening. Or this is like even before during Bush, like where California was legalized, but like... when did it get legalized officially? And was it 215 prop?
Yeah, so I think the original medical was 96.
96, but when were people like doing dispensaries? And it didn't pass legally until recently, Prop 64, correct? Recreational?
So that's recreational. Yeah. California was the first medical, but not the first recreational.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's interesting is Trump reversed that. He wanted them to start pursuing them, but they won't. So it's very, like I said, he's attempting to overturn lots of things. So that illegal police force was Justice Department police, which has nobody's ever tried to do that before. He's even getting creative with the ways that he's implementing dictatorships.
Keep going.
So, but basically, what I would say is interesting enough with this topic, with all these other topics. We're at these points where we talked about how the rich can influence so much. Do you know how much Mike Bloomberg spent on trying to be the Democratic nominee?
$600 billion?
Was it $600 billion? No.
600 million. It was between him and Tom Steyer that they both spent
Did
over
over
a
a
billion,
billion.
1.2 or 1.3 billion.
So we could have housed the homeless, Medicare for all.
Took where federal student loans was 300 billion, I think, to abolish, or
Yeah, 300 million, I think. So we could have done all these things.
Excuse me, I'm going in the billions.
Yeah, right.
But too many zeros.
So, but what I would say is
the way we're spending money,
is under your theory, he should have been the Democratic nominee. He outspent everybody by 10x. That's how uninfluential money is. Because you did the same thing you criticize others about, and you underestimated the ability of the average American to sniff bullshit and to assess authenticity and value. And even with $600 million thrown at it to confuse and disguise you that there's value to be had, nobody believed it.
600 million.
Imagine.
Million to marketers. And copywriters.
And what's interesting is you go look at somebody like Bernie, who's done it with so little amount of money, and because of his issues have a lot of truth to them. Biden is a combination of Elizabeth Warren, Bernie's issues, and Obama's.
He's kind of completely against Elizabeth Warren's entire ethos of the crime bill, the bank bill that he approved.
But go look at his latest platform rollouts. He's stealing language. He's stealing policy from all these people. So he may have positioned himself as a central version of these people, but the policy in most cases is pretty similar.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing. As much as Trump did that with the thing, but with the policy of the Republican Party, never actually believed in them, but said, "Oh yeah, I don't want to do this. Hey, immigration, closing the borders. Yeah, I'm for that. I'll build a wall." Like those messages, in terms of populism, just fucking hit the home. And just hit home so hard that people are like, oh, wow, he's been saying this that I want a Republican to say forever. He's got my vote. I don't care.
And I don't think those people will change. I think that the Trump supporter is still a Trump supporter.
The 35% of, people, I think it is, that it's perma-vote Trump no matter what.
Look, if in my opinion...
Or do you think it's less?
Whatever it is, it's more what really important is what percentage of the voting population are they? And that's the real thing, because they will vote again. So, but to me, it's something that the people who do care, if you do care about the fact that a deadlier virus under Obama had 12,000 deaths and a less deadly virus under Trump has over 100,000.
We're referring to the H1N1 here.
Correct.
Okay.
If you care that 8 people died in Puerto Rico when the hurricane came through, but 2,000 died afterwards due to the lack of a response by FEMA. If you care that over 3,000 kids at this time have been orphaned due to a child separation policy versus 0 kids orphaned under the previous administrations, all of them. These are factual differences that if you don't care about, you're not going to be convinced otherwise. There isn't an issue that will stand out to you. And it comes back to this whole, are you willing to be accountable? And if you're not, don't waste your time on these people. These individuals will pay the price of not holding themselves accountable because they'll lie to themselves the same way they lie to everybody else. And allow them to fall short on their own, where you can maximize your potential by combining your efforts and getting the neutral ones, the unmotivated ones, to want to support some change. And in this case, it's Biden back to a certain level of productivity.
Well, I think the defund the police one's interesting because all people are doing is saying, why is this much money going here? And as taxpayers and people who pay into the system, you are supposed to say, and you are to go to those town hall and city hall meetings, it's been great. People actually phoning in on Zoom. They've been hilarious.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that
accountability's on the up.
that people are on the up. Like, listen,
You know what the New York City Police Department budget is?
it's in the billions, no?
$6 billion. That's insane.
Well, again, I think that the police, and there's been a lot of great reports on there. I've been reading this book to, end the police, whatever the name is, but he's been working with police departments everywhere. And, the problem is, with all the scrapping of all these social projects we've worked on, everything's been put onto police officers in order to take care of so many things.
Listen, factually, for somebody getting paid $35,000 a year, they have some of the most responsibility of anybody in this.
Oh,
them and nurses and teachers.
to take care of homelessness and mentally and people with mental disorders, like it's the hardest job ever, and that's one of your two responsibilities.
For me, I was having this conversation. My aunt's a police officer, and I said, police brutality is horrific. Black Lives Matter, and every single person you know should feel the same way. The police should feel the same way. Good police should be holding shit police accountable. Even more so, if you did, you would see people willing to support the issues you also have. Interesting concept. Show some empathy for people being oppressed or affected by the people on your side, and in this case, the police versus minorities in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If you show them some empathy and hold yourself, the police, accountable for the things they're doing, then you can expect the opposing party, and in this case, these are minorities affected by police, to show you the same empathy and be willing to say, you know what? Your job sucks. It's really hard. In a lot of cases, you are the ones on the shit end of the interaction stick. Why don't we invest in you as well? Why don't we pay you more, have accountability and financial oversight in your spending, so that when you do fucked up shit, we hold you accountable. The police officer loses his job. That police officer goes to jail.
Well, the big one is always like we should be paying people more money. If we pay teachers or made it, and again, just because we're going to be paying them more money or police officers more money, it really just means there's going to be a lot more hoops you're going to have to jump through in order to do these.
That's good.
I think it's great. Again, like
these
people,
are the things that attract.
But that's what
higher talent.
Conservatives have done such a well job of, is to say, like, listen, we can't spend any more on this, or else we can't do this. Where are we going to get this money? But we know the money is there. When the Federal Reserve Chairman comes out and says, we have the ability to inject unlimited liquidity.
That's a bad excuse, because in my opinion, that's bad money. But what I would say is
bad money, because it's creating more debt.
Inflation. But what we could do is disarm the militarized police.
Well, I mean,
get them down to regular weaponry.
I imagine our $800 billion defense bill that we spend in this country a year.
That's separate from policing. So
that doesn't get passed down?
No. This is a big difference. You can't. Why is Trump so a fascist dictator? Because you're using federal military money to police states. Policing is a states' rights issue. You should never be allowed to use anything federal money to police in a state. Ever, period. It's a state right. You should not, and that's why he left. The National Guard had to leave states where governors said leave, because you don't have a right to be there. Our Constitution is not made that way. So it comes back to, we're only constitutionally allowed to police with federal money, so the state money.
But he's looking out for us, man.
Well,
he talks for us, Trump.
So you can have federal funding, and let's say he wanted to do this, right?
I'm just joshing you, man. Don't buy it.
If I wish I could, that's what I tell people, is I don't care who is president.
Agreed.
Make me buy it.
Agreed.
You came with some plan. You came with some ideas. Implement them. What factual, quantitative results have you provided?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's what Americans keep forgetting. Pretend you're the consumer. Pretend you need to be sold on a bill of goods that someone on a policy is going to come in and demand more.
And you want to hear something interesting,
negotiations.
Right? Some hot facts. How many cops do you think died last year due to felonious conduct? So somebody killed them committing a crime. Guess, in the whole country. 50 states.
700.
700. I thought thousands, because I saw, I think it was 1,300 or 1,700 people a year are killed by police.
Well, that's like the biggest thing that cops worry about. It's like,
my life's in danger, right?
My life's in danger when I'm going.
What if I told you it was 57 a year? 57. One officer in every state is killed. It's more dangerous to interact with police than to be police.
Well, here's the counter argument, is that people would say that because black people are more likely to commit crimes, that police see them as a certain way, that they're more inclined to do criminal activity statistically. And I don't think that you can think in that exact grain of moment to say more dangerous person.
This is subjective bias.
That's more ingrained.
As a professional,
yeah,
your job is to elevate your conduct. No, I hear you.
Yeah.
That's the
that's the counter.
Let's say just a sociological aspect. Let's say it's not black, Spanish, white. Let's say it's just when they're in low economic areas or low revenue areas, you have individuals who are more willing to commit a crime. When they're making less money, they're more willing to commit a crime. They're more willing to be violent, especially. Now, when they go into these low income areas and they have this subjective bias, you're paid by the government. You're a servant of the people. You're a professional that has to be held to professional levels of conduct. And my counterexample is in the military, you have rules of engagement. In Afghanistan, what the police do to American citizens would give you more, the military would hold you more responsible for this abuses than we hold our police. This is an issue when our police are held less accountable than our military is in war.
It's funny, I heard this same exact story from Andrew Scholes recently, where he's like talking with someone who was in the military as a Marine.
Yeah.
And they went over there to Iraq. And
they have to do policing missions.
After we, secured what we thought we had the country, we became police. And so they had to do the same regulations of protecting and winning over the hearts of people, treating them as civil.
But what's wild...
But I'm saying, so he's like, cops here, you shouldn't have that hard of a job.
And what's interesting is...
But again,
and it happened, right? So I hate the National Guard was out.
That us versus them mentality. And they're us. They're regular middle class, lower middle class individuals.
But a lot of it, in my opinion, is you have a inferior level of professional compared to other professions.
No, of course. We talk about salaries and pays.
Bringing in attracting the talent, to holding them accountable. But to do that, you can't have them get paid nothing and hold them. It's the public teacher issue.
Agreed.
You can't make public teachers have higher standards than charter and private schools, but pay them less. It's this whole thing where you have higher expectations and accountability, but you get paid less. And you got to deal with all the people, all the students who don't want to be dealt with by the private and charter schools. So you get what you get, like police. We don't pay you enough, and you're not performing. Now the difference here being is police have taken a step further, and they have these qualified immunities, like qualified immunity, that allows them to operate super constitutionally, in my opinion. And this is an issue because it goes back to my conservative beliefs that a strict constitutionalist reading is almost every one of these interactions you see on the television to be drastic violations.
Yeah. The
national, I haven't seen a single video. I've seen.
Well, even like there's another video I saw. Black guy just going to and from work, and he stopped because he's going 60 and a 65, and the guy is like, "Well, why are you stopping? Why are you detaining me?" It's like that is just that cop should be fired. He doesn't know.
You should have to write a ticket and let him go. But now, no, they're allowed to by law. So they've been given these additional.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when you're in a car, in most states, I believe this is case law, federal case law, that because he's dangerous in a car, it's inherently dangerous and inherently mobile, the police officer is allowed to remove you from the vehicle. That's why the police officers always do this. They're given this. Take that away from them. They do not need this. 50 a year are dying. They're not in danger. I know because almost every issue in America has more than 50 people a year die. Almost every issue you
white
care
on white
about.
crime, white on black, black on
every
black.
Issue.
Every issue.
And they're not government employees held to a professional standard. So, like I said, when we go to this whole how are these guys conducting themselves and accountability, there's over 400 videos, different incidents of police abusing protesters. There isn't a single one of the National Guard doing so or any military doing so when they were used. You know why? Because they're held to constitutional standards. And when they are held to those constitutional standards, where did the violence go? They're held accountable because if they go beat on somebody, you don't go to regular court, you go to military court where your rights to defend yourself are lower than a citizen.
Mm-hmm. Go watch A Few Good Men.
Instead of higher than a citizen like police. So I tell people, I'm not even asking you to take them and court-martial them, which is what we would do if we really wanted full accountability. All you police can be military. You guys want to act like this and be held accountable like military. You want your big military guns? You want your tanks? We'll hold you accountable like that. Now, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is invest in your police, invest in your teachers, invest in your healthcare, so that the average, and that doesn't mean socialize everybody in the country. That means make sure that they're above average pay. These should be desirable jobs. So very talented.
Especially because there's such a positive benefit on the community and the culture.
The best
society.
police officers are some of the most influential people in the public sector in the world, in the country.
How many lives do teachers touch? How many people, kids do they have come in there?
So
right now we have our
healthcare professionals, teachers, we're talking nurses especially, teachers and police officers.
Teachers are fucking and touching the kids. Police officers are killing the people. We got to fix that industry.
And it comes into, you can only have regulation and oversight with investment. That's how you regulate behavior.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you elevate and innovate.
Mm-hmm.
All can be done through investment, but oversight and investment, which is, like I said, where I fall on the liberal side. I fall liberal on necessary, what I call human rights issues, education, health, policing. When it goes into what I would call human pleasure issues, personal life, private life, strict constitutionalist. And in my opinion, to support a strict constitutionalist perspective, we've been shown to see that a liberal approach to human needs is actually the best way to do that. Mm-hmm. When we invest in our schools, like LeBron James did, he took a low-income area and turned it into one of the most successful academic schools in his area because he personally invested. I think the government should be making similar type of investments into low-income schools and things like that.
Completely. Now, during this whole COVID, the lockdown stuff, I've gone crazy gardener. I've started building my own shit. I got my own weed plants. I got some seeds sent to me from some jamoke online. Only to find out they're like all males. I think I've saved about half. They're looking great. They're strong. They're healthy. I credit, all that success to you and my sister, for helping me and tutoring me under the tutelage of Private Stock Veganics. I've been able to.
Oh, now new consulting firm, Private Stock Solutions, which we'll spend the last of the interview talking about. But
that's right.
But definitely, I appreciate the shout out because, like I said, that's where I have my most fun is getting individuals like yourself to be present in an activity like gardening, which gives you so much empathy for something that is less than you are.
Oh, especially I'm such a hard ass on any sports field or performance field, and now I'm dealing with something. It'd be like, and again, I do have a lot of good experience working with children in basketball, so I can have that patience level, but you're dealing with something that is sentient. You can't communicate back and forth to it,
and
but
it's
you
not
can
competitive.
It's not competitive.
There's no hoop to score. There's no game to win.
They're working together. You got worms in the soil, and you got to
just be worried about that.
Well, we had the wind the other night. We had like 40-mile-per-hour winds out here.
Yeah.
I had to bring everything inside. Certain sunflowers, got damaged and hit because it got knocked over. But it's like, to be, like I said, just a whole different experience. I've always been interested in, when I, come into the money, is having my own land, having chickens.
Yeah.
And
self-reliance, very conservative perspective.
There's certain self-reliance, and it totally is a conservative idea. But I also just think, what I've learned to come over the years is, experiencing, going and getting your own food, looking at things more than just styrofoam and saran wrap and
convenience.
Like this is what is a burger.
Versus accountability.
Broccoli because it's got a rubber band wrapped around it and it's dumped off somewhere. You don't know what it takes to go into that. And, one of the big things about travel, is we have we lack so much empathy here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So, I think, you promoting your own, course on how to grow, really successful cannabis from, your home is just something, we talked about this too, is citizens having the availability and the accessibility to even exercise that. Such a base right.
Yeah, I think these types of things that, one, the ability to decentralize this expensive information. I charge like $200 an hour for consulting if you want me one-on-one. So the project we're working on to create a video series so that people can affordably access that information, I think is extremely vital. I think that everybody's going to enjoy that video series. That'll be very detailed and very small bites of video. So we got to
wrap that up. We got to put that series together. We're working on the series.
I think that you get to experience one-on-one and people who pay for that service. To be able to have somebody who has spent a lot of due diligence, a lot of research, and a lot of application of this research into bite-sized information that can take you down this 10-year path I've gone on in 3 months and get to skip over the 110 times that we messed
fuck up the seeds or creating a clone
or whatever it may be, the
Yeah.
101 ways that you can mess up or the 101 ways that you can overlook understanding
Mhm.
the present moment that plant has put you in. We've had so many iterations over 10 years. You get 5 crop cycles a year. So I tell people over 10 years, I've seen 50 lifetimes of cannabis. It's weird because when you study people, you only get to view one lifetime because you die.
It's like how people study germs and diseases, and
That's
they go
why
through
they start there.
500 times.
You
X
learn so much more
the
about
generations and life cycles. It's
you
insane.
can learn about the basics of biology, and the more complex the organism becomes, the longer the lifespan goes, and the less truth you can find out because you can't iterate a test enough times over lifetimes. So this becomes why I think agriculture is so interesting, is we can teach very complex concepts. We get 5 chances a year to teach them, and individuals can take these concepts and apply them outward to more complex systems and even things unrelated to gardening. You start really understanding the way water, light, and energy move through living things and how that manifests matter. I tell people it starts as intro to gardening and it ends in quantum physics.
Yeah.
So it's something that really can lead you. And I'm an individual that started with an English degree and a law degree, and I understand, in my opinion, PhD level agronomy and at least master's level of quantum physics. So it's something that if
Whoa.
I've talked to a lot of physicists with a master's level degree,
Doesn't matter.
and I believe
Conversation's a conversation. We talked about this. Got to hold you accountable.
I put it into work.
Can you be put into the
So-
scientific
Yeah.
method and scientific theories and pass and execute on the test?
By-
we'll have to see.
By 2021, we plan on having peer reviewed published studies.
No, I'm not saying your studies or your theories
No,
in
I'm
general.
just saying the
I'm talking about-
application of them.
Well, you're saying you have a master's type degree.
No, I'm saying I have a level of understanding that would rival somebody who, instead of doing it themselves, purely studied.
I'm going to have you talk to the quantum mechanic.
I would love to talk to him because I think he
He's
would
on the
admit
podcast.
that there's 2 things, in my opinion. There's theoretical understanding and there's application understanding, reality. And the difference between me and most individuals who study the things that I study is I know how they apply to reality. So how are these very complex concepts, which most people just learn about theoretically and statistically, how they theoretically play out in a scenario, I can take this knowledge and apply it to you who don't need to understand any of the concepts, but you'll be applying quantum physics concepts that a master's level would understand. You're going to be applying them in something that, now, me, in my opinion, this level of understanding is way beyond a master's level, because people who have a master's level degree have never applied it more times than not.
Most, yeah.
So,
Well, especially when your whole like not the like purpose in it is to constantly try and prove things that either aren't real.
well, that's theoretical quantum physics. That's a whole nother realm of bullshit. In my
Okay,
opinion.
we won't even go there. We'll stick to
But
the course.
I'm saying, so what our course is, in my opinion, it is taking and interpreting quantum state and the quantum physics of a growing environment and putting it into bite-sized 2-minute instructional videos that anybody who knows nothing about plants, soil, water, light will not only learn about the world around them, but will be able to successfully harvest cannabis.
To try and explain it properly, it's like you have to remove uncertainty
Yeah.
from your equation, and trying to do that because the quantum level is like a whole different level of
It's more granular.
more we look at things. It's like hard to take that uncertainty that seems what quantum computers and stuff can predict and do. It's like, oh, it's not just a 50-50 in a coin toss or like a 1 or 2. It's 97% they can actually predict.
So what's interesting is when you put hard numbers on it, in my opinion, they become less valuable. What really, when you're doing, in my opinion, a good understanding of energy, quantum physics, really what it means is when we were in Newtonian physics, we measured mass, we measured weight,
Velocity.
we measured volume, we measured all physical interactions, right? Once we add energy states to this awareness, you have quantum. Why? Because an energy state is different on every molecule. It is changing throughout every second. And when you get this granular of data, of information, it can make you more unsure.
Of course.
So it ends up becoming your ability to take very complex things, complex data sets, position them in the correct perspective so that you can create a simple, easy-to-use solution.
All right, so we're putting a cap on this course. This course is going to be coming out. We're going to do August 31st, the latest. Hopefully by August 1st, we're going to finish and wrap this up.
Let's do it.
It's ready for the people. And I think we're going to wrap up the show because my bladder is about to explode.
How long did we run?
We're going for about like 2 hours and 10 minutes right now.
Oh, man.
How long are we gone? We're streaming for 2:16.
I want to know how many people stayed with us.
Oh, I can go look at that data right there. We can
I'm
check
about to hold you all accountable.
So before we wrap up, let people know, how they can connect with you, how they can get a course, and maybe even let them know some places where they can study and learn about this stuff, some places of research that, helped you before we put up your course.
So let's go with general knowledge. Download the NPR One app. It's been statistically reviewed, NPR, to be one of the most credible news sources, and they bring on other third-party content as well. Get educated on your day-to-day. I listen to it every single day. I'm that much of a nerd. Next, I would say listen to the Brandon Reese pod.
We're still going.
Some
people stayed. That's so.
Oh, he's saying he's been here the whole time. My guy. Yo, shout out to B-Boy.
Shout out to B-Boy.
Stayed for the whole interview. I would say that as far as agricultural content, check out our Instagram page at PrivateStockVeterans. Stay tuned for our video series coming out. I'll even do a little shout out to where I learned a lot of this stuff that I implement. Advancing Eco Agriculture has a YouTube channel by John Kempf that has incredible information on it. Really, in my opinion, the best way to start is to start doing. As you do, you're going to run into a bunch of things you have questions on. Learning how to do that due diligence is a big part of it. So check us out at PrivateStockVeterans. Bang. The original page. Check us out. Reach out. PrivateStockVeterans@gmail.com.
That's the camera. Not that.
I know. I keep looking at the computer. PrivateStockSolutions@gmail.com for any inquiries related to consulting. Especially, we've been getting into lots of remote consulting for hemp projects. We've been able to set up people with tested, certified hemp clones that have been tested weekly so that you don't hit your THC threshold, that 0.3% accidentally. We've also started doing in-house photography and in-house graphic design. We're working with a really talented graphic designer and the uber-talented photographer at Sparked Interest Photography. So we've been doing some business consulting, agreement consulting, branding, and photography for different cannabis and even outside of cannabis businesses. We're actually even doing some marketing and branding for a couple online shops and things. So our consulting services are really starting to expand. So don't hesitate to reach out. We love working with intelligent people who like pushing accountability and, if nothing else, are trying to innovate in an area of art or technology, especially related to agriculture.
Dude, we're just two Davy kids that made it out west. We're here in California, pandemic, markets crashing, and we're podcasting, man.
And I'll tell you what, I think we both found industries that continue to elevate the United States, whether it be through art and media or whether it be agriculture and technology, that have elevated the social and, I would say, even economic status of our country, and I really enjoy being a part of it.
Massively. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
The longest timed run shows, but we got a lot to say. We got a lot to go over. But we're going to sign off. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. B-Boy, we know you're still watching. Thank you. And everybody else who tuned in, make sure you go and hit subscribe, like the show. It's the way that algorithm wants you to click on it. I hate plugging that shit and doing that, because if you want to listen, you want to learn, there's something here and informative from the guests I bring on, the places I go, the people I visit, the things I go out and do. It's to bring back some crazy cool little thing about life, reality that exists, especially here in the U.S. So get the hell out there. Go out and do some stuff. Massive shout out to our sponsor, Ambry Gardens, providing me with all these different CBD products. If you use promo code BUSDRIVER, you get 15% discount. It supports this show. It's how we keep on bringing these guests. I go out and edit and shoot and do all this on my own. I need a producer. I know I'm running around here setting and tearing things down. So Go out there and support this stuff. I love this stuff. The muscle recovery, the deep rub has been great. I've been going crazy on the workouts. So I highly recommend you guys getting that stuff. If you're an athlete, you need to recover. And we talked about this on the show. Taking those cannabinoids and putting them on the skin doesn't need to be processed through the liver or the kidneys most times. You're going to get direct response and direct action from the topical ointment. And again, that's promo code BusDriver. And yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Get the hell out of here. Get on the bus. Peace. Oh, I gotta pee.
Nice. Nice.
Oh no, it stopped recording at 30 minutes.
The video?
Yeah, but YouTube's gonna have me a copy of the video.
Huh?
Long story.
That was recording?
Yeah, it's recording directly into Zoom. It's still recording into Zoom.
Even when you put it down? It recorded a video? Where's B-Boy? B-Boy, the video was going the whole time?